Hello, everybody. Today, one of my favorite people, and probably somebody you guys have been following on social media and her blog for quite some time now. But I am thrilled to introduce, if you don't know her, get ready to know her, Meghan Donovan. Megan and I worked together eons ago, and she has come so far building her own brand, her own company, and this lifestyle that is just I just want to step into your Instagram feed every day and like be your bestie. So, but Megan, in your own words, tell me who you are, what you do. I want everybody to know the whole gamut of your expertise, and then we'll kind of dive into everything else.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for having me, Shannon. It's fun to reconnect and revisit with you. My name is Meghan Donovan. I'm the founder of both Wit and Whimsy, which is a lifestyle blog really tailored towards elevated living, and then also the founder of Paris Perfected, which is a bespoke Paris trip planning service.
Which I have used in a couple of years. Yeah,
Yes, my
right.
former client.
Yes, yes.
You were one of my first clients, so thank you.
Of course. And also like former very satisfied client because when I got my like Paris perfected itinerary, I was like, I mean, I'm here for, this is certain I don't even know if I can do all this. I want to do all of this and more and like go back and show Megan like I did it all.
That's always my challenge is I always give more because I'm like, people like to have options, but then everyone comes back to me and they're like, we can't wait to use more of your X on our next trip, which I'm like, okay, that's job well done that I've inspired you that you want to get back to Paris. But yeah, it's always Paris is one of those places where I say it's like you can never do it all in one trip and you just have to manifest a return so that you can do everything else that you didn't get to on the first trip.
Exactly. Exactly. It's like one of those places where every time I'm there, I'm like, it's an annual trip. Like I mean,
Yes.
you're much closer on the East Coast, so it's like easier flight but for us, I'm like, it's just a stopover. Like we'll go there for a couple of days. Not actually, that sounds terrible. Paris is not a stopover
Yeah,
destination. It's a
yeah.
destination.
So
But
it's a good combo with London, though. It's like a good combination. Especially, I mean, you have kids, so I feel like London and Paris. I feel like are so well suited to bringing children, and so you just have to plan for it. Yeah, but you're right. I'm a little bit spoiled being based. I say now that I'm based in New York and in Paris because I'm over there frequently enough, but it is almost too easy to go from New York City. It's under 6 hours, so it's really wonderful. I don't think I could ever like leave the East Coast because of that.
no, it's like a crazy thing that I forget about too. Like it's like you can go to San Francisco or go to Paris. I choose Paris 100 out of 100 times.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, well, so let's dive back into a little bit about the story of Wit and Whimsy. For everybody on listening today, Megan and I worked at a global PR and ad agency together for quite a long time, and we
My
got to
first job out of college. It was my first job out of college. It's so crazy.
crazy, crazy, and we did events together and traveled together and worked together and collaborated on so many things. And in the background, Megan had a blog. And at the time, it was still like sort of this like foreign thing. Like, A, how do you have the time to even keep it up? And B, like, oh, like you're in the digital world. Like what's going on? Like, so did you start your blog in college?
Yeah, I started it when I was a junior in college. My blog origin story is really deeply related to my brother, who one of my brothers, he and I were together at the kitchen table. I think it was the day after Christmas in 2006, and he was very into emerging technologies at the time, which is so funny because he was like in eighth grade, I want to say. And he was like, you should really start a blog. These are going to be the next big thing. Everyone's starting them right now. And you have a lot to say and you have things to say about things no one else in this family is interested in, which was totally true. Like, I've always been the shopper. I've always had a lot of opinions. I was the friend in college that people would come to and be like, I'm going to Walgreens. What mascara should I get? And I'd be like, oh, get this one. This is the one I love. And so Wit and Whimsy was really born out of my love of kind of like sharing good finds and storytelling. I also was the kid in school who was always told I wrote too much. Like, I had too many words, too many pages, needed to edit down. And so I was like, this blog, no one's going to tell me that I need to edit it down. It's just going to be my own. But yeah, that was before Twitter had not been invented, Instagram had not been invented. I think the only social media platform at the time was Facebook, and that was obviously still relatively new as well. So yeah, I just started it as a hobby. Did not predict that I would be doing it all these years later, but did keep it up for the entirety that I worked in corporate America, including when you and I crossed over.
Yeah, yeah. And you had posted something on social recently, and I sent it to my husband, and I was like, "This is motivation of like, people not believing in your dream, or like, what are you doing? Like questioning that."
Yeah, I
And
had a lot of that back in the, well, I mean, I'm sure it still happens now. I hear of it less, but yeah, I think when you're doing anything new or that people feel like is more risky because you're putting your life out there, it is very intimidating. And I had to really drown out a lot of the hate that I got, or the judgments, or the, glances of, especially when I started taking photos of myself to put on the internet. But yeah, it was a lot of persistence, I think, but it was always something that brought me joy. And it was actually something I looked forward to after a 12-hour workday, because you and I worked in an environment that was extremely stressful, very long hours, working with clients that personally I wasn't necessarily very interested in. I wanted to do a great job on them, but it was for my personal level of interest. Like, I wasn't particularly interested in motor vehicles or digital payments.
mm,
So for me to be able to like go home after a long day and work on something that I was like, oh, okay, I'm going to talk about this new shoe brand I discovered, or Essie's new nail polish collection. Like, that was fun for me. And it was kind of a way to like decompress after a very intense work day. And that's what kind of like, kept me going. I obviously had a very different cadence of posting when I was like new in the workforce. But I'm glad even if it was like one post a week or a couple posts a month, I was glad I like at least sat down and kept it up.
totally, totally. And I think that's what a lot of people struggle with of like, I'm going to do this one thing, but then taking all of like the day-to-day action to make it happen, that's where like the give up is. And
Mm-hmm.
it's like it doesn't matter if you're like too busy or there's a lot going on. If you do sort of chip away every day over time, it becomes such a habit, such an easy thing like brushing your teeth, it just becomes
Completely.
a way of the day. So speaking of sort of like that pivot, I mean, you moved to New York and you left the West Coast and you figure out like this agency corporate world is not for me. Like what kind of like made you come to that decision, and then what'd you do?
Yeah, so I did, my career path was that I worked in three rather large PR agencies, or one smaller agency that was part of a big PR conglomerate. But I worked in PR agencies, and I had interviewed for a lot of jobs over my time in New York City. So I moved to New York when I was 25, I want to say. And so I was very ripe for like a new opportunity, started a new job, was constantly interviewing at different places that I thought would make me happier, be the career move that I wanted. I wouldn't get the positions. So I stayed in the agency world, and I distinctly remember my breaking point, because I had finally I always was one of those people that was like very driven towards like titles, and I wanted to be able to say that I was like a VP by the time I was 30. And I reached that precipice and crossed over, and I was so excited about it. But then I was like, but I don't even really like my job. So like, why was I chasing this title that, wasn't going to actually bring me happiness or change my day to day? And all the while I was doing my blog, and that required a ton of discipline, because I had to do blog photo shoots before 7:30, 8 a.m. before I would get into the office. I would work weekends, most weekends, and I was just really burning out. But my real awakening moment was the day after Thanksgiving, and this would have been the day after Thanksgiving in 2015. And I was working with a client where we had to do all this stuff for Black Friday. And I did not go to the bathroom that day. I did not eat. I was chained to a computer, and no one else on my team seemed to be carrying as much. And I just like came out of the room I was working in and like burst into tears. And I was like, this is not what life is meant to be. This is not how I should feel at 30 years old in a career that I feel like I have really worked very hard at. And what am I working for? And I felt I had gotten to that point where I was like really working for things that drained me instead of things that filled my cup. And so that was my breaking point, where I was like, I need to completely step back and determine like what does happiness look like from a career standpoint. And had started to like to kind of think, do I want to be able to do I really want to be able to like work for myself? Do I think I have the discipline to do it? And so I started talking to a lot of friends of mine, colleagues, all sorts of different people in varying industries that worked for themselves, and started asking them all my questions about, being self-employed. And the picture by that March of 2016 kind of had come together where I was like, okay, by June, I want to be self-employed. I want to be starting my own PR consultancy, but also doing Wit and Whimsy more full time. I want to be able to split my time 50-50. And it was the best decision I ever made. I'm coming up on 7 years of being self-employed. My career has actually wildly changed even since then.
Mhm.
But I think, so often we feel really stuck in careers because we feel like, okay, this is the thing I went to college for, or this is the thing I told everybody in my life was going to make me happy, or this is the career that I always imagined for myself. And then there's like a sense of feeling a little bit embarrassed where you're like, oh, wait, but this hasn't made me happy, or this isn't what I want to do. And I love the world that we live in now where it feels like there's a lot more opportunity to pivot and to change what you might want to do. And that's really just, I think, hopeful to look at if you're in a job that you don't necessarily feel like fills your cup. Like, what are the steps you can take? And even if those steps do involve work on weekends, work at night, work early in the morning, like start taking them now in order to begin to try and change what's how you spend your days, because it's a lot of days that we spend in our lifetimes at work.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think, you know, oftentimes we set these like high goals for ourselves, and it's like, I'm going to do this in my life. I'm going to get this where in my career. I'm going to be with this person. I'm going to have kids. I'm going to travel here. And then sometimes when you reach that destination, the dream falls flat. It's truly it's a box you wanted to check versus like
Yeah.
what you personally want. And so I think I've seen that happen to so many in my lives, and it's you you see people late in their careers. I mean, there are many people we worked with in the agency world where I loved them, but they were miserable. And they had gotten
Hmm.
so far, EVPs, SVPs, managing directors, whatever title it was, but I started off being like, I want to be like her, and then being like, I
Yeah.
want to do everything I can to not be like her.
Exactly. Yeah, and that was such a wake up call for me to be like, oh wait, this is what I thought I was chasing, and it's not at all what was actually making me happy day to day. And I'm someone that really, really cares about my work, and it almost to my detriment at times. So working in an agency environment where oftentimes a lot of the decisions were made without you for what you were spending your time doing, that it was like, well, this isn't this, I think I could be even more of an asset if I was working on things that I really enjoyed. But if you were a top performer, oftentimes you were put in the most difficult scenarios that really just caused burnout. And there were no solutions really to burnout. Like you're not going to solve burnout with an extra week of vacation or anything like that. And so it really felt like something that I had to like completely shift my perspective on what my career could look like. And it was a big decision, but definitely like worth the risk for me personally.
For sure, for sure. And then how did you I- how I hate to use the word balance because no one really balances stuff anymore, but
Yeah.
how did you manage then, like, okay, A, jumping into entrepreneurship and then running two things at one time? Like, was that a recipe for more burnout, or did you feel like more fueled in a way?
I feel like I got definitely burnt myself out in the first 6 months because I like essentially was barely sleeping because I was like so afraid of paying my bills, even though like I was fine. But like I live in the world's most expensive city. And so I was like, I have rent to pay and now I have to pay expensive self employment insurance and all of these things. So I really felt this like deep seated fear of, being able to ensure that I was paying my bills. So I burnt myself out in the first 6 months, but then I found such happiness in the freedom that I felt, so that no one was telling me you have to be in this meeting at this time. No one was telling me there's a Monday morning meeting every morning or every week. And so I was able to really pick and choose the pockets and where I was working. So, like, I would do client work, on certain days. I would block off all Fridays for no calls so that I had all the time in the world to be able to work on blog posts. I was able to go to like events that helped me from a networking perspective for my blog at 2 p.m. in the afternoon, which I was never able to do on a weekday previously. So I was able to really kind of like craft my schedule in a way that fueled me. And that to me is like the thing I still love the most about being self-employed is I love the freedom and no one's counting my vacation days and things like that. Of course, with all those benefits come, the cons of it's very stressful to be self-employed. It is hard to turn off, I think, if no one is telling you, hey, no, definitely we have that closed as a holiday. Like I work so many different holidays during the year that a lot of people have off because I'm like, oh wait, I forgot that this is supposed to be a holiday, but no one told me to take it off, so I guess I'm at my laptop. So yeah, there's certainly pros and cons with those, but I really love the freedom that comes with, being my own boss.
Oh, yeah, 100%. And then I think while it's nice to envision like the corporate world is shifting and it becoming more flexible, it's still hard to be like imagine yourself back in that because you can go to a
Hmm.
doctor's appointment without anyone asking anyone's permission. You can live your life
Yeah.
the way you want it to. So that is huge. And then, okay, so give me the timeline of when Paris Perfected came out of this. And I guess like also how did that come up? Because I'm
Yeah.
the assumption here of like you were able to travel a lot more without being like chained
Yes.
to like a butt in a seat.
Completely. Exactly that. And I had gone to I studied in background. My family lived in London in the 90s. My parents had taken us to Paris several times, fell in love. It's like the first place I remember really having like the feeling of like, oh my God, this place is so beautiful. I love it here. I want to come back. And I was only in fourth grade at the time. And then I went on to study abroad there. I had studied French since I was in fourth grade. So that was like the very natural choice for me for study abroad was, okay, I'm going to go to Paris. I'm going to live there for 4 months. It was very, very transformational as an experience for me. I felt like it was the first time I really owned my independence. I felt very moved and inspired. And those were things that I hadn't really felt prior to being 20 years old. And so I finally returned. I had returned a couple times, but I returned in 2014, and then I returned in 2015. And then I started to be like, okay, I think I want to go back. In 2016, I went back. And so these annual trips were then very feasible after 2016 when I became my own boss. And so I would go back for like a week. It completely filled my soul. I would feel so inspired. I would get different ideas. I would shoot things for my blog posts. And it was my trip. I was in Paris in 2019 for my birthday, and I just couldn't even keep up with the DMs. And I don't really have a humongous social media following, but I just could not keep up with the amount of DMs of like, my mom and I are coming to Paris. Where should we stay? What's your favorite croissant? What neighborhood do you like to stay in? And I was walking in Paris and I was looking at all these DMs and I was like, I think there's something here that would be a business. And I felt like people really understood and connected with what I call my version of Paris. Cause like obviously my version of Paris is different than anyone else's. But I also felt like 2016 was peak, or excuse me, 2019 was peak, what I would call the Kardashian version of Paris, where like I felt like everyone was going to the same places that are not very good. And I'm like, there's just so much better options in Paris. So it was kind of killing me to see people all go to the same restaurants that is just maybe it has a good view, but the food's bad. Or one of the number one places that people go to that gave me food poisoning. So I'm like, I just think that I have like service to provide here. And I came up with the name right then and there. And I came back, and a month later, I like put up a blog post. I had no service, I had no product, I had no website, no
Yeah.
brand really. I just had the name, and I was like, oh, let's just see what this happens. And I launched it at a really affordable price. And within 7 minutes, I had my first order, and I was like, oh. And then within 5 months, I had 100 orders, and I was like, okay, this is definitely a viable business. There's something to this. And I went back in February 2020, which we all know what happened shortly thereafter. But I had really grown it. I had to, I had to really lean into, a very different muscle of like helping people plan these trips. And then it was also adding another business to my plate, but it remains like the most fun for me to be able to help people plan their trips to Paris. But it had a lot of momentum, and then COVID happened. But as we all did, we pivoted and took a pause. And now I'm happy to say that it is back and growing, 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 since everyone's been able to finally return to international travel and get back to Paris.
And then you've expanded to have London, correct?
Yeah, I have London as an add-on now, which like is just a kind of was a natural. It was I got asked a lot about it. I would like to, eventually be able to help people with any element of France planning. So hopefully that will be, a workable goal for me in the coming years. I love traveling in France, and I really love the French people. So hopefully that will be a continued pursuit for me as we move forward with like the Paris Perfected brand.
Gosh, keep me posted. We did champagne, but we want to go back and do some more of the wine country and beaches and all of
Yes.
that.
Oh
So
my, there's just so much to do in France. That's the challenge, is like choosing what it is you want to do. Like Bordeaux is so beautiful. Provence in the summer is just everything you could wish for and more, in the Riviera. So yeah, it's a wonderful thing that there is so much to do there.
so much. Oh my gosh, I'm so thrilled because you know, every trip that you go on to Paris, I'm super stoked about, and I take screen grabs of, like, the super cool decor in restaurants for, like, inspiration, and, also, I'm one of the people who are like, y like, I'm, like, getting teased, but I, like, want to know more. Every time you also share out, like, "This restaurant's great, it's for my specialty my clients only," and I'm like, "Damn
Yeah.
it, why can't I be another client?"
Come back. There's now a return client product, so I can refresh your recommendations. Yeah, because I mean, Paris it's like any big city in the world, right? There's always something new, there's always something exciting to do. And I just really keep very close tabs on the best new restaurants opening, who's doing interesting things in the city, what are special exhibits happening at museums. And so I'm kind of obsessive in the way that I like track what's happening in Paris. And then I go back several times a year to kind of like suss it out, because if I see a thing like 12 times on TikTok, I'm like, I'm going to go check to see if this is actually good. Sometimes it is, sometimes it's awful. But I like to personally vet everything, which I think is an interesting element of the service versus, someone that just like writes a guide, publishes it. You can buy it for 20 bucks off the internet. Like that's fine. And there's certainly a market for that.
Yeah.
But I like my recommendations to be really bespoke, because when you went with your husband, that was a very different trip than when you go and you bring your three kids, right? Like you guys will have
Right.
a very different trip. And
Yes.
so I plan for honeymoons, I plan for girls going on a solo trip. I've planned so many 30th birthdays, which is so
Mhm.
fun. I've planned every type of trip at this point. I planned for someone who's bringing their mom who's 75 years old, who's never gone to Paris. And like, it just is so fun to play a part in these. Paris is such a special place, and it's a big occasion place. Like, it may
Mhm.
be a place you only get to once in your life. And so, whatever that trip is, I want to make it as seamless, as easy, and as rewarding as possible. And I always say that I think that, for me in Paris, I found a place that just truly, truly like inspires and moves me. And I hope that everyone in their lifetime can find a place that does that for them. Because I think if you have a place that every time you go back to, your heart swells a little bit in your chest, like that is a form of self-care. And so I really hope that, that could be Central Park in New York City for you. It doesn't have to be an international
Mhm.
destination, but I think it's so worth finding a place that really just like moves you and just brings a smile to your face.
Yeah, absolutely agree. I think there's so much that we can do for ourselves to be happy or find that joy or there's a line someone my husband had told me years ago that he used to be like an agent and then one of his clients had told him this and it was like the secret to happiness is always having something to look forward to. Like if you don't have anything to look forward to, then life is like blah. And if you have
Yeah.
that destination, that place, it could be as simple as like a bookstore or a coffee shop, that
Hmm.
makes you feel whole, then that's
Yeah.
that's your spot and it's yours, It could
Mhm.
everybody else could like it too, but like you got to find your thing. Uh,
Yes, I love that. I think that's such a good point.
so you with all the travel, like I have to ask because I'm one of the people who gets on a plane and gets a cold. Uh,
Yeah.
how do you like keep up like any sort of like a health routine, wellness routine? How do you stay healthy and take care of yourself?
I probably am not the best person to answer this because I don't do a great job of that when I'm on the road. I definitely do not work out when I'm in Paris, unless you count like me
You're
lifting
working.
croissants to my face. But I'm walking. Yeah, that's true. I'm walking a lot. I'm walking like 25,000 steps a day. So yeah, that's my form of workout, so that I can eat as many croissants as possible.
Yes.
I do little things for myself where it's like, I know I'm not going to sleep as well if I don't sleep with earplugs and eye mask. So, like, I'm going to do that every night so that even if I'm only getting 5 hours, I'm getting those like 5 hours or I almost sleep the whole time.
Mhm.
I take probiotics whenever I travel. So, I try to do things like that that are very small self care items. And then what I've really learned to do is like, before I leave and after I leave, I need time that is just like relaxed and chill. So like I've stopped being the person who has to go to the event that is the day after I get back from a trip. Like I'm not going to say yes to it because I know I'm going to cancel and I don't want to be the person that cancels.
Yeah. Yeah.
So really kind of like building in time for myself where I don't overbook myself pre or post trip has been really important,
Mhm.
which is really that's like flexing a muscle of saying no, which I'm not the best at. I think when you are self-employed, you're like, I have to say yes to everything. What if this is the next big opportunity? Like, what if this
Right.
person's going to be a client? So you say you want to say yes to everything, but in the last like 2 years, I've really exercised saying no more.
Mhm.
So I feel like I definitely try to do the smaller things that I hope will keep me healthy versus like trying to be the person that's gonna like wake up early and go to the hotel gym because I know that's not myself. And I also try to like bake in a little solo time. So if I'm not in a place by myself, like I really, really thrive off of solo time when I'm in Paris. So I never make any plans for the morning I leave. I usually take a 2:30 flight back to New York, which means I usually head to the airport around 10:30.
Yeah.
And that time in the morning is my time. I wake up at 7 and I walk the city. I go get croissants, I get snacks for the plane, I go
Mhm.
to the parks. It is Paris by itself in the morning when there's not a lot of people out it is magical. It truly brings me to tears most times. And so like I really try to build in time like that on my schedule that is just like me time. It is time for
Yeah.
me to reflect, time for me to have ideas and not be, feeling like I have to be with other people. So I think that's something that I really try to like bake in for my own mental health as well when I'm traveling.
That sounds dreamy. Yeah, I am reading a book now called The Comfort Crisis, and there's a section of the book and it's all about the amount of time you should be spending by yourself outside. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and without distraction. Like there's like three different levels of spending time outside. Like one is like, you're out there, like you're running out with your keys and your phone but you're still like by yourself and in your own world. And then the next is like you are out for many hours, not checking in. And the third is obviously like wilderness level, which I don't really know if that's you in Iceland.
Yeah, not so much.
Yeah, yeah. But but it's all about like the benefits of like shutting off and having that personal time because it does. It's sort of like is like your reset button. And, you know, it's been a while for me because I haven't traveled in a bit, but like I've seen you have these walks in the morning and it's like the walks bringing you to tears and like having that reset button and like starting
Mm-hmm.
the moment, like the next phase of your journey back in New York and back to sort of the grind. That is so needed for self-care and something like a lot of us just don't take that time to do because we're just like gotta go to the next,
Yeah.
gotta go to that event when I get
And
off
I
the.
think too, like if you travel with other people, like it's very okay to be like, I'm gonna take the next hour for myself. Like I'm gonna go sit in a coffee shop and like read my book. I'm gonna do, I'm just gonna walk and go get myself a coffee, and I'll bring one back when I've when I'm coming home. But
Yeah.
I think people often feel like they have to be with each other at all times. I see this with a lot of like groups of younger girls that travel together. It's like they're like, we feel like we have to have every single minute. It's like it's really okay to say like I want an hour out of this trip just to myself, because I plan a lot of trips for solo travelers. I get a lot of questions about how do you solo travel and feel safe. And you know, I've lived in big cities most of my life, so I feel like I usually have my wits about me, but
Mhm.
it's one of those things where I think like people are almost uncomfortable to be by themselves, or they feel like, okay, if I'm going to be by myself, I have to be on my phone. And I'm totally actually living in Paris for study abroad made me comfortable with dining alone, but that was certainly something I was not comfortable with prior. And now it's like I have meals by myself all the time. And so I just bring my Kindle.
Mhm.
That's my company, is a good book. I try not to be on my phone because I don't need to be looking at Instagram in that moment. I should be really tasting what I'm eating and taking in my surroundings and just enjoying my own company. And I think so often, especially in a world now where you have entertainment at your fingertips at all times, we're so afraid to be our own company.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes like we have the best ideas when we're our own company. So I really try to cherish that. And I don't do it enough in New York City,
Mhm.
but I really, when I travel, when I travel solo, I like to get certain meals with friends, and I'll, bake in friend time. Like in Paris, I have a lot of friends that live there. And so I'll have dinners with them and certain events and things with them. But then I always bake in alone time because, frankly, it's like such a gift to ourselves. And then I also really, my favorite form of self care when I travel alone is to like get a glass of wine and a dessert from room service and then have it in my pajamas, like watching a good Nancy Meyers film. And it's the best. It's very good medicine.
Yes. It sounds magical. Magical right now. Um, yeah. I know. I think I feel like we're similar in that way of I actually love traveling alone. It's amazing.
Yes.
Amazing.
Once you know, you know. Once you know
Yeah.
the beauty of self travel or you solo travel, you know.
Uh, it's just I mean I would leave every kids at home, just like go somewhere and a notebook. I've gotten called out by waiters before of bringing like I bring a notebook, a brand new notebook for every trip, and
Oh, I
sketching
love
it.
this.
Yeah, I'll write down like a cocktail I had, like here's the recipe I liked, or like just ideas. I I'd like to say I'm a drawer, but I can't draw. So, but putting that down, and the waiters have been like, "What are you doing?"
What are you
And
working on? Yeah.
and they're like, "We don't see people like this," and it's just a
I want to try that.
yeah, it's really nice because then also like you're gonna look back on it like months later, years later, and be like, "Oh, that was fun," or like in this moment, I was like
I'm
really
gonna make this cocktail. I
yeah,
remember how good it was. Like,
yeah,
yeah, I love that. I think that's such a good practice.
yeah. That's really freeing. But I know I wanted to dive back into something you said in the very beginning and tie it to something else. Like you are also a person like who knows like all the beauty products and everything.
Yeah.
Um, yes, recommendations are gold, and thank you for that new face Trinity recommendation because that is
Oh my God. I'm so glad you like it. I've been using mine every night since the start of the year.
oh, it is like I in the beginning I was like, it's not gonna work, it's not gonna work. And then now I'm like, holy moly, this like
Yes, it's
makes
such
the
a good device.
yes. So thank you for that hot tip. But I wanted to also sort of ask you a couple of questions about another area of wellness you've been public about, but sort of like because you've been in the health and beauty space too, maybe some tips for everybody. You got diagnosed with skin cancer and you
Mhm.
it, but you live in New York City and you travel to Paris a lot, not necessarily the bright and sunny destination all the time. Like, how did you even know and what are things like we could look out for?
Yeah, that was a very hard time. That was in August of 2019. And I will say, like, I definitely was somebody who was not great at sun care. I'm very fair skinned, and I was not great at sun care when I was growing up. and I had a lot of bad burns, and I had this spot on my upper kind of like back, lower neck, upper shoulder area, and it just kind of had stuck around, and it looked kind of problematic. And I have a history of skin cancer in my family, and so I was very good about going to get annual skin checks, which I just am the biggest advocate for. It takes 1 hour of your time once a year to go book with a dermatologist and have your skin done in a full skin scan, so that they can look for any abnormalities. And sure enough, this, once they had biopsied it, came back as cancerous. Thankfully, it was basal cell, which is of all the three types is the best to have.
Yeah.
But in doing so, it's also, once you find that, they tell you, all these statistics where it's your the chance of finding more skin cancer after you've had one increases for the next 2 years. The chance of finding skin cancer also increases your chance of having additional cancers, which that's a very scary thing to be told at, I think I was 34 or something at the time. And so I've become a real big advocate for people going to do their annual skin scans, and then really just having sunscreen on you at all times. And understanding the difference in sunscreens on the market, because there are chemical sunscreens and there are mineral sunscreens.
Hmm.
My doctor essentially told me, like, you should not be outside for long periods of time without a hat on, and you should not be outside for any time, even if it is dark and gray, without physical mineral sunscreens on. So I constantly have like a little mini SPF on me in whatever bag I'm carrying, so that I can reapply. I have tested 100 sunscreens trying to find
Yeah.
the good mineral ones, because there's so many bad ones.
Yeah.
And so finding the ones that are really good and actually like lifestyle, they work for your lifestyle, like being able to
Mhm.
put a makeup on over them, being able to touch up over makeup. So yeah, I want people to know what to look for. And I think, sunscreen is a pain, but it is something that can like truly, change your life if you're using it regularly. And so now I try to talk about it a couple times every year to just remind people. And thankfully I have been skin cancer free since 2019. So I hope that continues. But truly, it's one of the best things that you can do for yourself.
Yeah. I have two questions. Is mineral sunscreen the one that like turns your face white? And is
Yes, unfortunately.
okay, all right. And is the SPF in makeup enough?
No, so makeup, if it has SPF, you're basically not doing enough. And that is because the SPF is watered down as soon as it's put into a formula with
Mm.
foundation, BB cream, whatever. And so you really should be using your own sunscreen. And it should just be a sunscreen product. So if you have like a foundation with SPF in it, put that on after you put on sunscreen.
Okay.
But yes, the physical sunscreens are the mineral ones that have a lot of them have the really bad white cast. They're
Mhm.
getting so much better though. In the last 2 years, I've found like at least three that I really like, that I think they almost look like a tinted sunscreen, but they're not actually tinted. It's just that they kind of put in a little bit of an undertone so you don't get that horrible white cast.
Mhm.
I have not found a body one that I love yet, so I'm still on the search for that. But for face sunscreens, they've gotten a lot better in terms of like not making you look like you've just put on a white face mask and have left the
Mhm.
house. So
Mhm. Mhm.
I'm glad that the technology is improving. But the reason being is that mineral provides a physical blocker versus chemical is actually seeping into your skin. And so that's why they say, like, with chemical sunscreens, if you apply them, you have to wait 30 minutes before you have sun exposure. Physicals, you don't have to. Like a mineral sunscreen you're putting on, it's like you have created the physical barrier between you and the sun.
Yeah.
And so that's also kind of nice too, is like if you want to roll up to the pool and put on your sunscreen right away and like get in, you can.
That's really good to know. Also, that sunscreen that is like very like white on your skin, on your body, because we have a ton of that here,
Yeah.
it doesn't come off. So
It's so hard to get off. I know that's the other thing. You like have to have a loofah in the shower. I know it truly is not like, that's why I actually don't go and sit on beaches anymore, because I'm like, it's not even worth it. Like I'll go and honestly just like sit under an umbrella,
Mhm.
always have a hat on. But like, yeah, it is. I hope this is the year where someone comes out with a body SPF that is a mineral sunscreen that is not awful to put on or awful to take off.
Yes. I'm in. I don't care how much it
Yeah.
costs. I will take it. I also have
Yeah.
extremely fair skin and
Yeah.
am terrified. I haven't done it yet, but it, when I moved to LA, someone said that you'll notice like one side of your body is so much more like sun tinted than the other because of driving. And
Yep.
that is true. But the other thing is this true or this is false, Megan? Uh, Airplanes, I heard airplanes, the UV rays are so
Oh,
much
I
stronger.
don't know.
I don't know.
Probably. I know people that definitely wear SPF like on a plane.
Mhm.
I feel like I never sit with the window open. Like I
Mhm.
might put it open for a photo, but that's probably true. You're closer to the sun. I but we'll need some we'll need like a derm to listen to this
Yeah.
and weigh in
Yes, yes.
to like be able to know what runs in your family history. And
Yeah.
as I said, I have familial history of skin cancer, and you just have to know like what are the things that are, is it driving? Like should you be putting sunscreen on all over? Should you have a hat on? Things like that. So
Yeah, and I'll have a in the show notes, guys, I'll link to some of Megan's blog posts where she talks about skin cancer scare and sunscreens and all of those things. So you can go directly to them. And because I'm on the quest too because it's so important, and especially that the weather's so much weirder here in LA than in
yeah.
Boston. And just slathering on a little bit in the morning on the face is like just not enough. Or like, oh, this
Yeah.
SPF 40 in it, I'm good. No, I'm not good. So
Yeah, exactly. And it's like the reapplying is the pain also,
mhm,
but it's definitely worth it.
yeah, for sure. Okay, well, I have one last question, and it's a question that I ask everybody who comes on the podcast. And so Amazon kind of scooped me on this when they actually came out with physical buttons, by the way, but I had this question
Oh.
long before. Uh, so if you had a button to do anything in your life, and it was just like with you all the time, and this thing could happen every single time you pressed it, what would that button do?
I think a lot about how I wish that everyone treated every scenario in life with a little bit more kindness. I think we're living in a world where people really want immediate results and immediate things, and they don't want to wait in lines, and they get frustrated and impatient. And I always like, I come back to that phrase around you, what is it? You catch more flies with
Mm,
honey, that, like that phrase where I think you can go so far in life and just so far in day to day if you treat such scenarios with a little bit of extra kindness. My mom always tells me one of the things she likes about me most is that when I interact with someone, I say, "How are you?"
mhm,
And most of the time, she's witnessed everyone reply. Like it could be, for example, like a server in a restaurant. They'll say, "Hi, how are you today? Can I catch your order?" I'm like, "Good, how are you?" And
mhm,
their reaction oftentimes is, "Thank you so much for asking." And it's like, it's just such a small thing. And it's even just like saying, have a good day to the person that put my groceries in the bags or something.
mhm,
And I think if you go through life emitting that sort of like kindness and that sort of more positive energy, I think everyone would be in like such a better place and
mhm.
happier overall. So I feel like just emitting a little bit more kindness to everyone's day to day would probably be what I would choose to do with my special magic button that I hope eventually is made.
Yes, I'm gonna work on it. I love that because you do something every year around the holidays that this year I was like, I'm doing this of like getting Starbucks cards and handing them out just to, people who need it. People who had
Yeah, it's a really easy thing to do.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and
Yeah.
I just try to like, try to make a little bit more kindness in whoever I like encounter, and I hope that that, comes off in my online presence, but also in my offline presence, because I believe that everyone needs a little bit more dose of happiness in their life, and if you can do it in a really easy way, it's worth doing.
Yeah, yeah, because you don't know anybody else's story. You can make a ton of assumptions about why someone
Yep.
might be in a bad mood or why someone said something or why someone is like, sort of has a despondent look on their face. But, just one little
Yep.
thing can change somebody's world. So
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, Megan, this has been a treat to have you on. I wish we could be sharing a coffee and croissant together,
I
but
know. One day, come
one
visit.
day, one day in New York or Paris.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I know. I would love that. I also need to get back to LA because I always love visiting LA. So,
Come, the rain is over.
yeah.
Yeah. Yes. It's beautiful, it's green, it's lush. Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm just gonna hit stop here.